There we go. Hello, Fantastics. It's Mr. Clintastic, here with a Strixhaven School of Mages Limited Archetype Guide. Today we will be focusing on the Lorehold Guild, aka Boros Red White. So yeah, I'll be going over cards that have certain abilities that go together, that might synergize well together, and they might help you build an idea of what kind of deck you'll be building if you go into a certain color pair. There's five color pairs focused on in Strixhaven. Red white, green black, white black, red blue, and blue green. So each one has an elder dragon that is the founder of the college and whatnot. So there's a lot of background stuff with it. But yeah, I'm here to try to help you get through draft and sealed, at least having some fun, at least feeling like your deck did a little work for you. And these are my initial ideas. So if you enjoy my content, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to help my channel grow in the future. And let's begin. So like I said, we're focusing on the Lorehold Guild, Red White. And there's a few things that I find interesting in this guild. One is Magecraft. Each guild has Magecraft. Some might be better than others, and I went on and brought together all of the Boros Magecraft cards that you might be interested in using in your pool. Make sure everything can be seen. Okay, so let's start off. We have Leonan Lightscribe. It's a 2-drop white spell. One generic, one white cat cleric with Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get 1/1 until end of turn. And that's what Magecraft does for you. Every time you cast an instant or sorcery or copy that instant or sorcery, you get a trigger, and I think that's going to be really, really powerful. So yeah, every time you play instant or sorcery or copy, Magecraft triggers and basically gives all of your creatures 1/1. Now I feel Leonan is one of the more powerful Magecraft cards because this particular card can go into really any of the Boros decks. We have several that we're gonna discuss today, but I think it doesn't just belong in Magecraft, it extends into other potential archetypes as well. So yeah, Leonan Lightscribe, definite good card for your Magecraft deck. Next we have Lorehold Pledge Mage, a 3-drop, 1 mana, 1 generic, 2 hybrid white red core shaman with first strike. And whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Lorehold Pledge Mage gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So once again, this is just perfect together. You know, you pick up your Leonan Lightscribe, you got your Lorehold Pledge Mage. Every time you cast your spells, you're just getting pumps. Your Magecraft, let's see, so it even works on itself. It pumps itself 1, and then Pledge Mage pumps itself 1, plus whatever you get off of the trigger. So I think those are some great Magecraft abilities right there, and it has first strike. If you're trying to put together Boros Magecraft, I think these are a couple of cards you're gonna need. Next we have Lorehold Apprentice, a 2-drop, white-red human cleric with Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, until end of turn spirit creature you control gain tap. This creature deals damage to each opponent. Now I put it here in the Magecraft category simply because it has Magecraft, but I do feel this goes more in the spirit deck, which we will get to soon enough. But it is, you know, a 2-drop 2/2. It's on color, so if you want to play it in your just to have an additional Magecraft trigger, or maybe you have slight spirit synergies in your Magecraft deck, which is possible with certain lessons and whatnot. We'll get into lessons in a bit. But yeah, I don't think Lorehold Apprentice is necessarily necessary for your Magecraft deck, but it is a card that I wanted to discuss. Next we have Silver Quill Pledge Mage, a 3-drop, 1 generic, 2 white-black hybrid 3/1 with Magecraft. Now, This is a white-black hybrid. It even has silver Quill in the name, which it belongs to the Silver Quill Guild or College, but it's a card that you can play in your Boros deck as well, and it also has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Silver Quill Pledge Mage gains your choice of flying or lifelink until end of turn. So 2 spells triggering is going to give this 3/1 flying lifelink, which I think is awesome. Do you need it in your Magecraft deck? Maybe. I would like it more than Lorehold Apprentice in my Magecraft deck. Definitely. It's just something to consider. Even though it's Silver Quill, it can still go into your Boros deck. You can pay 2 white mana for the cost instead of 2 black. Alright, a couple more notable mentions here. Clever Lumimancer, a human wizard in white for 1, has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Clever Lumimancer gets 2/2 until end of turn. It's a 0/1. Awesome. I mean, if you're trying to put white, red Magecraft together, this is a card you're definitely going to want with some pump spells, of course. It starts off as 0/1, which I've seen some criticisms for that, and understandably so, but it becomes a 2/3 with any spell cast or copied, any instant or sorcery cast or copied. I think that takes the value of it up really high. It's uncommon, so you might only get a couple copies if you get that many, but if you're trying to put together white-red Magecraft, Clever Lumimancer is definitely a card you want. Next we have Eager First Year, a 2-drop, 1 generic, 1 white human wizard with Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Eager First Year gets +1/+0 until end of turn. It's a 2/2. I love it. I feel both of these cards really go better with these 2 cards up here. Because they're just better. I think they do better with the Magecraft ability. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, Eager First Year gets +1/0 until end of turn. So all 4 of these red-white spells here get a plus bonus for Magecraft, which is probably what you're going to want to be composing. These cards are okay. And yeah. Next, we're going to discuss Storm Kiln, excuse me, Storm Kiln Artist, a 4-drop, 3 generic, and a red dwarf shaman. Storm Kiln Artist gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a treasure token. I think that's amazing. It's a 2/2. A 2/2. For 4 now. The mana cost is kind of hefty, especially when you're trying to use it to get treasures, which are used to ramp. But it's another Magecraft creature you can throw in your Magecraft deck, get value over time. I do believe the 2/2 power and toughness is kind of meh, but depending on what you're trying to do, you might want to play it, but I wouldn't rate it too highly. If you happen to pass it in your Boros deck, meh. This deck doesn't require it. Next we have Prismari Pledge Mage, a 2-drop red-blue hybrid orc wizard with Defender and Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Prismari Pledge Mage can attack this turn as though it didn't have Defender. It's a 3/3. Now I think this card is great. It's above curve. A 2-drop 3/3 is going to help you from being attacked. Then when you trigger your Magecraft, it's going to attack in very well. I like it. Next we have Elemental Expressionist, a 4-drop blue-red hybrid orc wizard with Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, choose target creature you control until end of turn. It gains if this creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else, and when you exile this creature, create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. There's a whole chapter of text on this card, right? But essentially, whenever you trigger Magecraft, say they're trying to remove one of your creatures, for instance. Hey, Luigi? Luigi Fall, thank you for the follow. But yeah, this card gives you value. If your creature would leave the battlefield, you exile it instead of putting it somewhere else. And when you exile it, you get a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. Do you necessarily need this in your Boros Magecraft deck? I don't know. I'm going to be sticking to low drops for mine, personally. And if I happen to pick a card like this up, I won't be upset. But it's just like the other card that's from Silver Quill. It's a is it spell? But it's still playable in your Boros Magecraft build. Next we have Reflective Golem, a 3-drop Golem. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Reflective Golem, you may pay 2. If you do copy that spell, you may choose new targets for the copy. So I felt this really needed to be brought up here, because if you're running Magecraft, I recommend choosing cards that's going to target your creatures, trigger your Magecraft, give you even more value. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery that targets only Reflective Golem, you can pay 2, copy that spell, so you're going to get 2 triggers. 2 triggers on your Magecraft, right? Which could be invaluable. I think that card's really strong. You're going to want a few copies of this when you're playing your Boros Magecraft build to get those copy triggers going on, because it will trigger your Magecraft each time. Next we have Spell Satchel, a 2-drop artifact Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 book counter on Spell Satchel. You can remove a book counter from Spell Satchel, add a mana, or you can pay 3, tap, remove 3 book counters from it, draw a card. I don't know. I don't think you necessarily want this in your white-red Magecraft deck. I personally think the best one's going to be aggressive. Next we have Conspiracy Theorists, a 2-drop in red human shaman. Whenever Conspiracy Theorist attacks, you may pay 1, discard a card if you do draw a card. Whenever you discard one or more non-land cards, you may exile one of them from the graveyard. If you do, you may cast it this turn. So I think I included this simply because it helps you draw some cards, and you can cast cards that you exile, triggering Magecraft and whatnot, so you could do it with your instants and sorceries. But this really shouldn't even be here. This isn't a great card for Magecraft, not necessary for it. So yeah, these are the big spells I saw for Magecraft in Boros, and these are cards that you're going to want to consider when you're trying to build your Magecraft Boros deck. Here we go. So this is what I brought together for Boros Spirits, which overlaps with Boros Graveyard a bit, but these are really like the notable cards that I saw if you're trying to compose a red-white spirit deck in sealed in draft. We have Huffery, Ghostforge, a 5-drop, 3-mana, red-white, legendary creature dwarf, cleric, 4/5. Spirits you control get 1/1 and have trample and haste. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types, and it has, when this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to your graveyard. Once again, there are some chapters on these cards. There are some big chapters, but essentially it's a spirit lord that gives all your spirits 1/1. Then you make spirit token copies, I think that's pretty great for the value, and you're definitely going to want it if you're putting together. If you see this, get it and build spirits. Duh. And also, like I said, this overlaps with the graveyard archetype a bit. When that creature dies, it goes to the graveyard and then you exile it. I'm pretty sure. So it goes along with Quintorius Field Historian, a 5-drop, 3 mana, red white, legendary creature, elephant cleric. Spirits you control get 1/0. Another lord. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. Perfect. So if you get both of these cards, you're in great shape. Granted, they're 5 mana, and those are things you're gonna have to consider when building any of these decks in limited. Is you're gonna want to get to your spells. How are you gonna do it? But this is right now. I'm discussing the spirit version, but like I said, I did put together a graveyard version that's gonna kind of go over a lot of the same cards. Next we have Venerable Warsinger, a 3-drop, red, white, generic spirit cleric, vigilant trample, 3/3. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may return target creature card with mana extra less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of damage Venerable Warsinger dealt to that player. I mean, it's a spirit cleric. My goodness, your spirit deck's gonna want this. Your Boros deck is gonna want this. In all honesty, this could go in your Magecraft deck. It could go in your spirit deck, and it can go in your graveyard deck. It does it all. Vigilance, trample, for 3/3 for 3, which is already great value. And it gets you things back from the yard to your hands for you to play again. Also to trigger your Quintorius. What more can you ask for? Next we have Returned Past Caller, a 6-drop, 3 generic red, red-white hybrid, and a white spirit cleric, another spirit. Flying, whenever ETBs return target spirit, instant, or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. This is another card that probably could slide right into your Magecraft deck with no problem, because it does get you an instant or sorcery from the graveyard. But I put it here in spirits. It is a spirit, first off, and it can get you a spirit, an instant, or sorcery back from the yard. I think Return Past Caller, even though it's a 6-mana card, gives you a lot of value all around, and you're definitely going to want it in your spirit and your graveyard deck. Once again, we have Lorehold Apprentice. We already went over Lorehold Apprentice, and this is where I feel Lorehold Apprentice best serves her purpose. You play a bunch of spirits, and whenever you trigger your Magecraft, your spirits get tapped, deal 1 damage to each opponent. Spirits in this format don't necessarily have flying, so they might not be able to attack all the time. Being able to just ping your opponents out the game, I think, is really valuable in your spirit deck, and I think this is where Lorehold Apprentice shines. Next we have Blood Age General, a 2-drop, 2/2 Spirit Warrior. Tap, attacking spirits gets 1/0 until end of turn. So this kind of goes along with your Spirit Lords. Personally, I don't like that you have to attack with it. I'd rather that be like pay 1 or pay 2 or something like that. But I guess that would make it too OP. But you can tap it down and give your whole squad 2/0, which is really strong. And I'd pick it up anytime I'm trying to build a red-white spirit deck. Next we have Pillar Drop Rescuer, a 5-drop, 4 generic, 1 white flyer. When it ETBs, return target creature card with mana 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. It's a 2/2. So this is another spell. Even though I put it here in spirits, it is a spirit. I feel that it really goes in any Boros archetype. You can put it in Magecraft and get one of your valuable Magecraft creatures back, and I think that can be valuable at any point in the game. 5-drop 2/2 isn't great, but it is a flyer. I'd play a few copies of this in any of my Boros decks, but I think it shines best in spirits and maybe even graveyard Boros. Next we have Strict Proctor, a 2-drop, 1 generic, 1 white spirit cleric. Whenever a permanent ETBs causes a triggered ability to trigger, counter that ability unless its controller pays 2. So this is for my players that really just want to have a 1/3 2-drop flyer and stop some abilities. You got to consider this is going to stop your abilities from triggering too. But I threw it here. I really think it can go into any Boros deck. But you got to play it to your strength. If you know you're doing a lot of triggered abilities and whatnot. And it's only when a permanent ETB. So even like Magecraft, if you're doing the Magecraft deck, you don't want to really play this and counter your own thing, right? Yeah, you're not going to want to sit there and counter your own thing. So, I recommend this more so in the Boros Spirits, because that's what it is, a spirit. Or even maybe the Boros Graveyard. No, I don't know. It's a 1/3 flyer in white, and white in this format has a lack of good flyers. So I might play this just for the fact that it's a flyer, but it doesn't necessarily synergize with any of the strategies. Next we have Illustrious Historian, a 2-drop, 1 generic, 1 red human shaman. 2/1, you can pay 5, exile Illustrious Historian from your graveyard, create a tapped 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. I think this card is fine. 2-drop, 2/1. It's a shaman, not a spirit, but you can exile it later, bring a spirit to the board. I think this might go more so in the graveyard deck, but it did have that spirit value and I didn't want to overlook it. Next we have Stonerise Spirit, a 2-drop, 1 generic and a white spirit bird, 1/2 flyer, pay 4, exile a card from your graveyard, target creature gains flying until end of turn. I think this card could really go in any of the archetypes. It can go in Magecraft. It can go here in Spirits. It is a spirit bird. And like I said, there's kind of a lack of good flyers and cheap flyers in white. Like, I don't think there's even a 1/1 or a 1-drop flyer in white this set. So this is going to be something you definitely want in Boros. And the fact that it can exile from your yard and give other creatures flying is really valuable. I put it here in the Spirit section because it is a spirit itself. But I do believe it could go in Magecraft or Graveyard as well. Pilgrim of the Ages, a 3-drop, 2 generic and a white spirit. When it ETBs, you may search a library for a basic Plains card. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Pay 6, return Pilgrim of the Ages from your graveyard to your hand. So I like this card. 3-drop, 2/1's nothing to write home about. But it goes and gets a Plains out of your deck, thins your deck. It's also a spirit, so having this as an additional spirit isn't horrible, right? Especially if it gets pumped up by the squad. Also, this could potentially go in your Magecraft deck. Maybe if you have the, like the Leonan or whatnot that'll pump your whole squad. This becomes a 3/2, a little bit better. But by itself, I just put it in the spirit category. And late in the game, if you want to thin your deck some more, you can pay 6. Bring it back from the graveyard, put it into your hand. This also goes in the graveyard deck. Next we have Spellbinder's Familiar, a white spirit dog. Whenever 1 or more cards are put into exile during your turn, put a 1/1 counter on Spellbinder's Familiar. This ability triggers only once each turn. So when you exile things from your yard, you can trigger your Spellbinder's Familiar. I think this is a decent card, but I'm going to have to wait and see how many times we actually get to do our exile from the yard abilities. But in a spirit deck, it's a spirit dog. I think it'd be fine, but you will have to account for trying to exile things from the yard. Because this isn't just, when something leaves the graveyard, which I thought it was originally, it's specifically exile. So it'll work with your Illustrious Historian, or it'll synergize with your Stonerise Spirit really well, right? But things that just recur from the graveyard to your hand won't trigger it. It has to be exiled. Next we have Stonebound Mentor, a 3-drop, 3/3, 1 generic, red and a white. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, scry 1. It's a spirit. It works with the graveyard theme. It's going to be in the graveyard section as well. And it's a good creature for the cost. 3-drop, 3/3. You can't complain about it. And then incremental value over time if you are composing that get out of your graveyard type deck. I like it. Next we have Pillar Drop Warden, a 4-drop, 3 generic and a red spirit dwarf with reach. Pay 2, tap, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Activate only as a sorcery. So this card can also go in your Magecraft Boros deck to, get your instants and sorceries back and trigger them again. Help you try to close out the game. It's a 1/5 reach creature, which I think is relevant. Might block off some flyers for you. I like this card a lot, although it's just in the spirit section right now. It might be in the graveyard section. I do believe it can go in all 3 versions of the Boros deck. The graveyard spirits and the Magecraft, because of its ability. I like it a lot. Next we have Fuming Effigy, a 4-drop, 3 mana and a red spirit. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, Fuming Effigy deals 1 damage to each opponent. Once again, another card that I believe this could go in the graveyard deck as well. Boros does focus on graveyard a lot, and I think this would be great. It synergizes with your 1-drop dog here. But once again, I don't know if you'll necessarily want it in the spirit deck. It goes well with the spirit lords, and it also has value when cards leave your yard. And it's a 4/3 for 4, which isn't bad at all. And then we have Ageless Guardian, a 2-drop, 1/4 spirit soldier. I mean, what can I say? If you're already playing spirits, you have your spirit lords, your spirit synergies, play Ageless Guardian. It won't hurt you, and it'll block well for you early. And I think these are a couple cards, some instant cards that make spirits. We have Make Your Mark, a 1-drop red-white hybrid. Target creature gets 1/0 until end of turn. When that creature dies this turn, create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. So this works on your creatures and your opponent's creatures. If their opponent's creature is going to die for some reason, boom, you can get a 3/2 token. If your creature is going to die, boom, get a 3/2 token. And next is a card I think is really nice and can really go in all Boros decks. Lorehold Command, a 5-drop, 3 mana, red and white instant. Choose 2. Create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. Creatures you control get 1/0 and gain indestructible and haste until end of turn. Lorehold Command deals 3 damage to any target. That player gains 3 life. And sacrifice a permanent, draw 2 cards. I like this all around. I mean, it makes you a spirit. It can pump your creatures in Magecraft. It can deal damage, act as removal. So it'll probably be in the removal section as well. And you can draw cards off of it. So Lorehold Command, excellent card. Trying to get to my next section. It's not one to work with me. thought this was gonna work way easier. Thank you, Luigi Fa. I appreciate it. It's not really wanting to pull up the rest of my documents for some reason. Oh, geez. That's not what I was trying to do. Wonder why it's giving me so much trouble when it did the other two just fine. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. Did I just overlook that? Alright, I'll just have to cut that out of the YouTube video. Thank you for your patience. Sorry about that. But the next deck you might want to build in your limited pool in Draft and Sealed is Graveyard. Like I mentioned earlier with Quintorius, Stonebinder's Familiar, really all the Boros cards that I mentioned from the Spirit deck, they really work for the Graveyard deck too. And I brought the Stonebinder's Familiar up high because when you're exiling from the yard, I think you're really going to want to have Quintorius, Stonebinder together. Now, the dog does not work, Stonebinder does not work with Past Caller, for instance, because it returns a card from the graveyard to the hand. It only works when you exile. So it won't work with Warsinger. It'll work with Conspiracy Theorists, as I mentioned earlier, and Illustrious Historian. It won't work with the Pillar Drop Rescuer. It'll work with the Stone Rise Spirit. So there wasn't really much to even say with the Graveyard version. It's really more of a sub-theme of the Spirit deck, honestly. You can run your Conspiracy Theorists or whatnot to exile things from the yard. But in my opinion, that's a lot of work. You could just overall run like Spirits or incorporate your Magecraft or whatnot. I just wanted to make sure that those were discussed. Huh. There we go. I'm figuring out technology. So next, I wanted to go over the learn and lesson cards in Boros. I don't think I have these in any particular order. I think I just have the learn abilities first and then the lessons after. So first we have Rise of Extus, a 6-drop, 4 mana, 4 generic, white-black hybrid sorcery. Exile target creature. Exile up to 1 target instant of sorcery from a graveyard. Learn Once again, this is one of the Silver Quill, aka Orzhov spells, but it's only 2 white, really. So it can go in your Boros deck, no problem. Exile target creature for 6. I mean, it's high, it's a sorcery. Exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from a yard. That might give you value, and you get to learn. Get a card out the sideboard, a lesson card. That's what the learn lesson cards are. If a card has learn on it, you can then choose to, is it rummage? You can draw a card, discard a card? No, you can loot, discard a card, draw a card, or you can go to your sideboard and pick up a lesson. So I think Rise of Exodus is playable in limited. I might only run at max 2, at most 2. 3 is kind of excessive, especially if you're running just white red. But if you're hurting for removal, you got to go with what you can get. And I think the fact that it has learn on it is really cool. Next we have Professor of Symbology, a 2-drop, 1 generic, 1 white core cleric. Whenever it ETBs, learn, it's a 2/1. Can go in any Boros deck, especially, literally, it seems basic on the surface, right? A 2-drop, 2/1. But if you get multiple of these and you fill your sideboard up with notable lessons, you'll be happy. You'll definitely be happy to see 2 or 3 of these in your deck. Next we have one of my favorite cards that I've seen as far as just being a support card. Sparring Regimen, a 3-drop, 2 generic and a white enchantment. Whenever it ETBs, you learn. I think that's really cool. And then whenever you attack, put a 1/1 counter on target attacking creature and untap it. That's what's really cool. Like, every time you attack with a creature, you put a 1/1 counter on it and untap it. It basically gives it vigilance. And I think any Boros deck, any deck playing white in Strixhaven Limited is gonna want to run Sparring Regimen. I would play a playset, a literal playset of Sparring Regimen in my limited deck, and just try to stomp face. Like, my God, that's what you do with this card. And then on top of playing it, you get to learn and go get a lesson out the sideboard. Sign me up all day. Next we have Study Break, 2-drop, 1 generic and a white, instant, tap up to 2 target creatures, learn. Okay, this can help you close out the game in a Boros deck. Maybe, right? Or it can give you the time you need to establish yourself or reestablish yourself. You kind of got an aggro deck with Boros if you do like Magecraft, but if you're doing more so like Spirit Graveyard, then I think that's more like a mid-range deck. So you might need Study Break to kind of like slow your opponent down. And unfortunately, unlike blue that'll tap something down and make it stay tapped, it's just for that instance. But you do get to learn with this. I would definitely run a couple copies if I have some good lessons to go with it. Next we have First Day of Class, a 2-drop, 1 generic and a red. Whenever a creature ETBs under your control this turn, put a 1/1 counter on it and it gains haste until end of turn. You learn. I don't necessarily like this card. It's just not something that gets me hype. I'm so used to putting counters on things that's already on the board that it's a little difficult for me to wrap my head around. Play something and then when a creature ETBs, you get a counter on it. Like, that's really different. But it is a learn card, which I think is important. Let you go get a lesson out the sideboard. It's instant speed. I'm gonna have to see this at work. I might not even run a single copy. I don't know how this is gonna play out. But when my opponents start running it on me and running those dubs up, I'll probably get used to it. Next we have Enthusiastic Study, a 3-drop, 2 generic and a red instant. Excuse me. Target creature gets +3/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. You learn. Your Magecraft deck is going to want this, right? Your Spirit deck is going to want this. Your Graveyard deck is going to want this in Boros. Like, this is great. 3/1 and trample. For 3, it's going to trigger your Magecraft, no problem. And you get to learn, going to get another sorcery. I feel this fits best in the Magecraft deck, actually. Magecraft might just be the best deck for the learn spells, because you're going to get that trigger off of them, that value for playing your instants and sorceries. Next we have Igneous Inspiration, a 3-drop, 2 generic and a red sorcery. When it deals 3 damage to any target, and you get to learn 3 mana. So I think this is one of my favorite, other than that enchantment, I think this is one of the more powerful learn spells across the board. Unlike the other remove spell, the 6-drop, this is only 3 mana. You can deal 3 damage to a planeswalker, creature, or to the face, and learn. I feel like this is, in a lot of packs, first pickable. I could be overrating the card, but it definitely goes in Magecraft. Definitely wanted in your spirits, in your graveyard deck. I mean, what else can I say? It's a well-balanced card, and it'll let you go get a lesson out the sideboard. Next we have Academic Dispute. 1 red instant. Target creature blocks this turn if able. You may have it gain reach until end of turn. You get to learn. This is kind of controlly, right? You can make a creature block and kill it, or you can give one of your creatures reach. But either way, for 1 mana, you get to learn at instant speed. I think that's really valuable, especially for your Magecraft decks. Like I said, I think that's where it's really going to shine. But you can slide this into spirits and graveyard too. Next we have Retriever Phoenix. 4-drop, 3 generic and a red. Phoenix, flying in haste. Whenever it ETBs, if you cast it, learn. So it only learns if you cast it. As long as it's in your graveyard, if you would learn, you may instead return Retriever Phoenix to the battlefield. Okay, so at first I wasn't really considering the lesson learn archetype of actual deck by itself, but this is one of those cards where you'll definitely want to have learn in your deck, right? I feel it fits in pretty much every Boros deck. You know, you can run this in your spirits, your graveyard, your Magecraft, but you're really going to want that learn ability to keep getting value. And honestly, this probably fits best in Magecraft. Honestly, I'm starting to feel like Magecraft might be the better archetype, because spirits is a little expensive and it might be a little difficult to compose with so many of the cards being rare and mythic. But I really like Retriever Phoenix, and it has the learn ability on itself. I love that. Next we have Guiding Voice. 1-drop sorcery. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature. Learn. Once again, that's another card that goes really good in Magecraft, in my opinion. What else can you ask for? Next, we're going to go over the Boros Removal spells. There we go. Yay. I'm getting used to it. Alright. So Boros comes with a few pieces that you'll definitely want to pick up if you're trying to play Boros in Strixhaven. We got Rip Apart, a red-white sorcery. Choose 1. Rip Apart deals 3 damage to a target creature or planeswalker. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. 2 mana. Can't complain. 3 damage. It'd be decent, but there are some big butts in this format, so you'll have to keep that in mind. Next we have Lorehold Command. I already mentioned that before. The 5-drop, 3 generic red and a white instant. You can choose 2 modes. Create the 3/2 red white spirit. Give your creatures 1/0 and indestructible. I kind of glossed over that indestructible thing. That's actually pretty relevant. Next you get to deal 3 damage to any target. Gain 3 life. That's not bad either. And you can sacrifice a permanent. Draw 2 cards. seems good to me, and I'll probably pick this up a lot. 2 copies in my deck won't make me upset. 3 copies I think is kind of pushing it. But that could be wrong. This card is pretty decent. And if it's topping your curve, maybe it's exactly what you want to see there. Next we have Pigment Storm, a 5-drop 3 generic 2 red sorcery. Deals 5 damage to target creature. Excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead. I actually like this card a lot. People are going to be running spirits, pests, fractals, things that might have small butts to them. Or, I mean, this deals 5 damage, but if you get to hit one of their 1/1s, it's like having trample. They got 4 life left. They're dead. It's like a 5-drop deal, 4 damage to a player. I really like this card a lot, especially at common, but it might not be as great as I'm making it seem to be. Next we have Igneous Inspiration. We just discussed this. I think this is a great removal piece. 3 damage to any target. Learn. What else can you ask for? Next we have Devastating Mastery, a 6-drop in white. It has an alternative cost. You may pay 4 rather than pay the mana cost, and if you do, your opponent gets to pick up 2 permanent spells and put them in their hand before you destroy all non-land permanents, or you can just cast it for 6. I really don't know how Boros takes this card, because if I'm trying to be Boros Magecraft aggro, I'm not going to want to blow up my board, right? Maybe if I'm trying to be more of that graveyard deck, maybe. I don't know. Devastating Mastery is scary. Board wipes are always great in my opinion. But I think the white archetypes are trying to play their creatures this time instead of being more like control-y. So we'll have to see how this works out. But it is a removal spell, and it'll probably be rare that I pass it up. Next we have Heated Debate, a 3-drop, 2 generic, and a red instant. Spell can't be countered. Deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Instant speed. Yeah, common card, so you'll probably see that a good bit. And 4 damage isn't nothing to scoff at. Next we have Crackle with Power. It's a 2 red XXX sorcery with deals 5 damage. No, deals 5 times X damage to each of up to X targets. So I believe I discussed this before, where if you get up to like 14 mana, you deal 20 damage. I know 14 mana is a lot, right? But say you board wipe and then you have Crackle with Power at 14 mana. I don't know. Or maybe you're making treasures. But I had to mention it in the Boros removal spells. I mean, even with just 5 mana, you're dealing 5 damage to a target. So it gets better over time. I like it. Next we have Draconic Intervention, a 4-drop, 2 generic, 2 red sorcery. As an additional cost to cast a spell, exile an instant of sorcery from your graveyard. So this could potentially go in the graveyard deck. Draconic Intervention deals X damage to each non-dragon creature, where X is exile card's mana value. Exile a creature dealt this. If a creature dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. Exile Draconic Intervention. So kind of like a pseudo board wipe, where it's dependent on the card you exile from the yard. I kind of like it, especially if you know you're running like big butts, you know, and then you can kind of control and gauge what dies. Next we have Explosive Welcome, an 8 mana, 7 mana, 1 red instant. Deals 5 damage to any target and 3 damage to any other target. Then you add 3 mana. So when you do get to cast this for 8 mana, you get 3 mana back. So it makes it 5. Then you deal 5 damage to any target, 3 damage to any other target. Once again, I think this more so goes in like the treasure build, where you'll be able to actually cast the card. But maybe you're trying to go for that mid-range type shenanigans with these spirits or something. Playable. Next is Expel, 3 mana, 2 generic and a white, instant, exile target tapped creature. I think that's just fine. Instant speed, exile target tap creature, yes. It's common, easy to pick up. I'd run 3 copies of this. You really just got to worry about vigilant creatures at that point. Did we already discuss Rise to Exodus? Pretty sure. Nope. We discussed it in our lesson learned section. But here's Rise of Exodus again. Removal spell, 4-drop. Means 6-drop, 4 generic, 2 black-white hybrid sorcery. Exile target creature, exile up to 1 target instant sorcery from a graveyard, learn. And then we have Defend the Campus, a 4-drop, 3 generic, and a white instant, choose 1. Creatures you control get 1/1 until end of turn, and destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Typically these cards are okay to get, even without the creatures you control get 1/1 until end of turn potential, but this is going to be great in your Magecraft decks. I think Boros Magecraft is going to be really nice. I think Spirits are going to be okay if you can really put that mode together, but I think Magecraft has the most versatility, and this gives you even more versatility, being able to give a 1/1 counter, give all your creatures 1/1 till end of turn, or destroy a creature with power 4 or greater, still triggering Magecraft. Next we have Reduce the Memory, 3-drop, Lesson. Exile target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. Something you can tutor up with Learn. I think that's great. And Introduction to Annihilation, 5-drop, Lesson. Exile target non-land permanent. Its controller draws a card. You typically don't want to replace the threat, but if this is just lurking in your sideboard, I think you're fine. And to kind of wrap up the Boros archetype discussion, we're going to go to notable mentions. These are cards here that I felt like didn't necessarily go into a particular archetype, but I still feel like they're very valuable and you'll want to play your Boros deck. For instance, the founder of Lorehold, Velomachus, Lorehold himself. Excuse me. 7 mana, 5 generic, 5 generic, a red and a white, legendary creature, Elder Dragon, flying, vigilance, haste, 5/5. Whenever it attacks, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may cast an instant or sorcery spell with mana value less than or equal to Velomachus Lorehold's power from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest from the bottom of your library in a random order. This definitely could go in your Magecraft deck, Spirit deck, Graveyard deck, Red, White, Shenanigan deck, whatever. Velomachus is great. If you can, first off, 5 mana instants and sorceries are about your limit anyway, right? It has some pretty high costing ones, and maybe you can do a 3-color type build. And I'll probably get to that at some point. I'm gonna try to do all the archetypes for the schools that are being released in Strixhaven. But yeah, Velomachus is great. Hits the board, swings in, has vigilance, doesn't get exiled by a little common card like the 3-drop, exile target tap creature. I love it. I think it's one of the better dragons for the for limited. Next we have Mila, Crafty Companion, 3-drop, 1 generic, 2 white, legendary creature fox. It's one of the MDFC's modal double-faced cards. Whenever an opponent attacks one or more planeswalkers you control, put a 1/1 loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. Whenever a permanent you control becomes a target of a spell or an ability an opponent control, you may draw a card. It's a 2/3. So I'm going to discuss this first half first. This can easily slide into any of your Boros decks as well. It gives not a layer of protection to your creatures or your permanents, but it's pseudo protection because it gives them the chance to replace themselves with another card, which is always valuable. And it's a 3-drop 2/3. I'm not going to complain about that. Also, what makes this card even higher is the fact that it has Luca, Wayward Bonder on the back. You can choose this to play if you happen to be at this stage of the game. 6 mana, 4 generic, 2 red. Legendary Planeswalker Luca. +1, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. If a creature card was discarded this way, draw 2 cards instead. Okay, way to draw cards. -2, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Always strong. It gains haste. Exile at the beginning of your next upkeep. The next upkeep. So you get to keep it throughout that turn. I think that's really cool. And -7, you get an emblem with whenever a creature ETBs under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. And it starts off at 5. So you only have to up this twice, then you can get the emblem. Luca is ridiculous. And I'll definitely play it in all of my Boros decks. If I see it, it'll probably make me start thinking about which Boros deck that I actually want to run. Here's Mavinda, Student's Advocate, a 3-drop, 2 generic, and a white bird advisor with flying. Pay 0, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that spell doesn't target a creature you control, it costs 8 more to cast this way. If that spell will be put in the graveyard, exile it instead. Activate only once each turn. So this is, in my opinion, more so for your Magecraft builds. You'll want to get cards with like learn and, you know, like target creature gets this and trample and learn and all that. And you can pay 0, get that card from the yard, and then just pay his mana cost and trigger it again. I think Mavinda's great for that. It's not really great for you wanting to go get, you know, your board wipe out of the graveyard, right? Like 8 mana plus, 6 mana? Like, you're not going to want to do that. But for your cheap pump spells, Mavinda is great. I'll play it pretty much in any of my Boros decks, but more so Magecraft. I keep saying that the more and more I read these cards, the more and more I feel like Magecraft's lesson and learn mechanics is going to be kind of the way to go in Boros. Again, we have Retriever Phoenix. I just put it here because it goes in all the decks pretty much. You know, you just need a couple things with learn to make it good. And here we have Blade Historian, 4-drop, red-white hybrid, human cleric. Attacking creatures you control have double strike. It's a 2/3. Put this in your Boros deck. My goodness. You only need 1 on the board because you can't like double it. But getting multiple copies of this won't hurt you at all. Having 2 or 3 copies to drop it and start getting value off of it. Double strike on your creatures is absolutely ridiculous. Next we have Elite Spellbinder, a 3-drop, 2 generic, and a white human cleric with flying. When it ETBs, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast this way costs 2 more to cast. This is a 3/1. I think the card's good. It's a 3/1 flyer for 3. It can go in any of the deck, and it kind of just slows your opponent from playing one of their good spells for a turn or so. I don't know how much I like it. I gotta just see it at work a little bit more. Next we have Selfless Glyph Weaver, 3-drop, 2 generic, and a white human cleric, 2/3. You can exile it. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Goes into any Boros deck. It can protect your entire board. Grab this card if you're running any kind of white deck with creatures. It's amazing. Next we have Hall Monitor, a 1-drop in red, 1/1 with haste. Pay 2, a generic and a red. Tap. Target creature can't block this turn. I put this as a notable mention because, I mean, if you need more playables, it's a 1/1 with haste. It's playable, and you can make it so a creature can't block this turn. Could be significant, especially if you're red-white Boros aggro, you know. You'll want to get through blockers. Next we have Thunderous Orator, a 2-drop, 1 generic, 1 white, core wizard, 2/2 with vigilance. Already passed the vanilla test, so you know it's good, especially with vigilance. Whenever it attacks, it gains flying until end of turn if you control a creature with flying. The same is true for first strike, double strike, death touch, indestructible, lifelink, menace, and trample. So I put this in the notable mentions slot because I didn't even know where exactly to put it. And I think it has a lot of value in any of the decks, really, if you can give it any of those abilities. So I think those are just things you'll want to consider. Like, the only thing it doesn't really get is haste. Yeah. You can't give it haste with your hall monitor, but you can give it pretty much anything else. Next we have Plarg, Dean of Chaos, a 2-drop, 1 generic, 1 red, legendary creature, Orc Shaman. You can tap it, discard a card, draw a card. You can pay 5 for generic and a red. Tap, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary non-land card with mana value 3 or less. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put all reveal cards not cast this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, once again, this is another card I think goes really well in Magecraft. You know, you pay 5, reveal... Wait, no. Non-legendary, non-land card. Yeah, so this does work with permanents, but I do feel it's best with Magecraft. Cheap spells, you go find them. Granted, you got to do it for 5. You can do it at instant speed, too. That's pretty crazy. Next, we have Augusta, Dean of Order, a 3-drop, 2 generic, 1 white human cleric. Other tap creatures you control get 1/0. This can go in your spirit deck, your Magecraft deck. Your tap creature gets 1/0, so when they swing in, they tap, they pump. That's not bad. Whenever you attack, untap each creature you control, then tap any number of creatures you control. I'm still a little off on that ability. Like, you attack, you have to untap each creature you control. It's not a May ability. Then you can tap any number of creatures you control. So, do I still get to do my 2 damage? I'm going to have to see that at work, but I think the card's good for pretty much any Boros deck. Next we have Flame Scroll Celebrant, a 2-mana, 1 generic, 1 red human shaman. Whenever an opponent activates an ability that isn't a mana ability, Flame Scroll Celebrant deals 1 damage to that player. Pay 2, 1 generic and a red. Flame Scroll Celebrant gets +2/0 until end of turn. It's a 2/1. Once again, this card goes in pretty much any Boros deck. Has what, the fire breathing ability. You pay 2, it gets 2/0. Just keeps getting better and better over time with more mana. And then the flip side, this is also an MDFC. Plarg and Augusta's MDFC. They're 2 sides of the same coin. Revel in Silence. We have a 2 white instant. Your opponents can't cast spells or activate Planeswalker loyalty abilities this turn. Exile Revel in Silence. So I typically don't like these abilities that only last a turn. But the fact that your opponent can untap on their upkeep, right? And you just play this. Your opponents can't cast spells or activate Planeswalker loyalty abilities this turn. It's like taking their turn away. Legit, it's like taking their turn away. I love this. And I do believe Flame Scroll Celebrant / Revel in Silence is a pretty high pickup no matter what Boros deck you're in. Next we have Ardent Dust Speaker, a 5-drop, 4 generic and a red Minotaur Shaman. Whenever it attacks, you may put an instant or sorcery card from your yard on the bottom of your library. If you do, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. It's a 3/4. So Ardent Dust Speaker has a lot going on in my opinion. It's a 5-drop 3/4, which isn't exciting, right? But when it attacks, it doesn't even have to land damage. You can put an instant or sorcery from your yard on the bottom of your library. Saves you from decking, which could be relevant. But also, if you do, you exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play both of those cards this turn. Both, like, so as long as you have open mana, you're getting a lot of value out of your Ardent Dust Speaker. Like, that's a lot of value. You get your instant back out the graveyard, and you get to cast the top 2 cards of your deck. I'm pretty high on this card. If the format isn't too aggressive, I think we'll see a lot of work from Ardent Dust Speaker. Next, we have Efreet Flame Painter, a 4-drop, 3 generic, and a red Efreet Shaman with double strike. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery from your graveyard without paying its mana cost this turn. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. It's a 1/4. This is nasty. With double strike, if it just lands one hit on your opponent, it can get 2 cards out the yard for free with no mana restriction. You understand what I'm saying? Izzet has a lot of big spells, and we're going to get to Izzet later on. But if you happen to play this in your Izzet deck and one of those big cards in your yard, you're going to love the value you get from your Efreet Flame Painter. But even in Boros, like Boros Magecraft, I think you can get a lot of value from this because you swing in, you get the double strike, you get 2 instants from your or sorceries from your yard. Let's say they're pump spells, right? Boom, boom. Then your other creatures with Magecraft triggers. Like what's your opponent supposed to do but die? Leonan Lightscribe, I already mentioned him earlier with the Magecraft cards. Just a great card overall, Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get 1/1 until end of turn. I still feel like this pretty much goes in any Boros deck. Just like Strict Proctor can go into any Boros deck, just being a 1/3 flyer. Next we have Letter of Acceptance, a 3-drop. Add 1 mana of any color. You can pay 2, tap. Letter of Acceptance, draw a card. It's an artifact. I like this card a lot, and I think this can go in literally any deck. I would probably play 2 to 3 copies of these because it's not just mana fixing, it's not just mana ramp, it's also draw a card attached to it. So I think that's really valuable, and I'm gonna value it highly, even though it's just a common card. Zephyr Boots, 1 mana, equipped creature has flying. Whenever creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, discard a card, equipped for 2. I think this goes easily in your Boros decks, pretty much any deck. That's why these are notable mentions. Team Pennant, 1-drop. Equipped creature gets 1/1 and has Vigilance and Trample. You can equip it for 1 to a token, equip it for 3 to a non-token. Once again, I think that goes with your spirit decks or whatnot, your aggressive builds. Beam and Defiance, instant, 2 mana, 1 generic and a white. Target creature you control gets 2/2 and gains hexproof until end of turn. I just thought that was a really good card. Defend the Campus, we talked about that. The 1/1 or destroy creature with power 4 or greater. Show of Confidence, 2 mana, 1 generic, 1 white. When you cast a spell, copy it for each other instant or sorcery you've cast this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature, it gains Vigilance until end of turn. So I think this card is okay. If you happen to have played another spell this turn, you get to trigger it twice, and I think that's just silly value for no reason. You happen to play 2 spells that turn, okay. 3 creature gets put a 1/1 counter on 3 creatures, I guess, or 3 1/1 counters on target creature. I think Show of Confidence is gonna definitely see some play. Semester's End, 4-drop, 3 generic and a white, instant. Exile any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of the next instant, return them to the battlefield under its owner's control. Each of them ETBs with an additional 1/1 counter on it if it's a creature, and an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a planeswalker. So I don't know how this is going to fit in Limited. I like the card a lot. I don't recall too many ETBs from Boros, but I think that's where this card would really shine, if you got a card with a good ETB trigger, or you compose a deck with good ETBs. But I don't know if this format really is the format for this card. But I did think it was interesting and worth mentioning. Next we have Thrilling Discovery, a red-white sorcery. You gain 2 life, then you may discard a card. Discard 2 cards. If you do, draw 3 cards. Okay. Helps you can put instants and sorceries in your yard to play for free with your other guy, right? With your Efreet Flame Painter. We already discussed Sparring Regimen. Dramatic Finale. It's an Orzhov card, but once again, you can play it in Boros if you really go grind into it. Creature tokens you control get 1/1. Whenever one or more non-token creatures you control die, create a 2/1 white. 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying. This ability triggers only once each turn. I like it a lot. I even like this in spirits. Your spirit tokens could get another anthem, you know, ridiculous. And then when your physical creatures die, you replace them with another token that gets boost off dramatic finale. I really like this card, and I'll definitely be playing it. And last, we have lands. Archway Commons, ETB's tapped. You sacrifice it unless you pay 1, so don't put this on the board if you don't have any mana. Don't put this out turn 1. You can add 1 mana of any color. I think that's very relevant in this format. Access Tunnel, tap, add a colorless. You can pay 3, tap, target creature with power 3 or less. Can't be blocked this turn. Something you're going to want in your Boros decks for sure. Hall of Oracles, tap, add a colorless. Or pay 1, tap, add 1 mana of any color. Or tap, put a 1/1 counter on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery and only if you've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. I just think this can offer you a lot of value over the game, and to have a land that's putting counters on your creatures, ridiculous. Just by tapping it too, come on now. Come on now. And here we have our Boros lands. Fury, Calm, Snarl. As the ETB, you may reveal a mountain or plains from your hand. If you don't, the ETB's tapped. If you do, it doesn't. And Lorehold Campus, ETB's tapped. You can add a red or a white, or you can pay 4 and scry 1. I think that's really powerful. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's all we have from Boros. Like, my goodness, that actually took quite a while. But this was kind of like my first archetype guide. I think I hit all the key points. Like I said, I feel like there's a few decent builds in Boros with your Magecraft. I think that's the deck to lean towards, honestly. Your Spirit deck, I think if you really dig in, you can put it together. Your Graveyard deck really needs a lot of the same things the Spirit deck needs. So maybe you'll be doing a blend of those. Don't forget to utilize your Learn Lesson mechanics, which I still feel goes best in your Magecraft Boros build. But yeah, I hope this Strixhaven School of Mages limited archetype guide for Boros helps you in your limited events, your draft and sealed events. If you have any comments, please leave them below. Let me know what you think. If I missed anything I can add. And yeah, next time I'll be coming with the Is It Limited Archetype Guide. And yeah, I'm going to take a quick break and we'll see what we're doing next, guys. As always, you guys are fantastic. My name is Mr. Clintastic, and I'll be back in a bit.